Welcome everyone to today's Orchestrator meeting. Looking at the agenda, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 topics, which is great. First topic, we have the Outreach organization has started its winter turn, and I have added the Samba integration to Ceph ADM. And I've also already got 2 students who are interested in the project, and yeah, let's see how it goes. If we can manage to get some integration into Ceph ADM, it would be really awesome. So Cephforge upgrade LS. Sage, I guess that's you, right?
Yeah, I was taking another look at this. Previously, I was thinking that this should just look at the releases.yaml file that we maintain in the Ceph repository as sort of a canonical list of like all the versions that are available and so on. We could even like mark which ones are like toxic and shouldn't be installed, that sort of thing, if we have like a release that we want to pull, whatever it is. But it occurred to me that maybe isn't so good, because if you're using like a custom registry locally and you're pulling images from somewhere else, you probably want to list the versions that are available there and not the ones that are upstream.
Yep.
Possibly. So then I went back and looked at your pull request, and it was doing some like annoying gross stuff to look at the registry. And so then I looked to try to find if there is a Python library for interacting with the Docker registry. I found one, and it seemed to work sort of with Quay, but I couldn't make it work with Docker. And it's not clear that it's very well maintained. Then I just got annoyed. I was like, why isn't there just like a library for dealing with container registries? Because it seems like that's like the only thing the entire world wants to like think about is containers. Why isn't there a good library for using them? Anyway, that's where I ended up. I don't know if anybody has any like questions on what path we want to take, but
We are porting always migrating to the latest tag using those registry hashes. Does it even make sense to even list these tags, or is it enough to check if the latest tag differs from what we are having right now?
for me, I would like to be able to like see what versions are available when they were released and what version I'm running now, and be like, oh, I want that one. That's what I would want. And then maybe also have like a command that just goes to the latest blindly. But I'm not sure I would use that very often.
But what do you have against my pull request?
I think the thing that bothered me was that it like there's one string that you're basically telling the cluster, this is where I want to get my containers, and it's going to be like play.io/ceph/ceph. That's the image I want to use. And your pull request, if I remember correctly, it's looking at like registry.hub.docker.com/v2 whatever. Like there's no clear mapping between like the quote unquote name of the image and the API endpoint that you're using to talk to the registry. It wasn't clear to me how that actually worked.
I think it's still hard-coded at that time, right?
Yeah, but it's not docker.io, right? Like if you're specifying an image on Docker Hub, it's docker.io slash
Yes,
slash image.
but it's only Docker that is so weird.
Is it? I hopefully.
Yes,
I don't know.
yes, it's only Docker where you need to use different. The Docker.io registry has different subdomains for different parts of the API. Every other registry is sane.
Okay, but what if you're deploying like the Docker registry on premises?
Then everything is working fine. It's just the Docker IO registry that is using those change subdomains. So not the
Okay,
container that you can pull, but the official Docker Hub registry is a bit strange. Everything else is sane, at least as far as I know.
okay, okay. Well, maybe I can take your code and wrap it up in a night class, or I don't know. I can't remember exactly how it looked, but
The
pretty fast
problem
stuff.
with this code is it's unreliable.
Unreliable how?
Um, Registries might choose to disable listing tags. And this was a reason not being able to rely on it was a showstopper at this time. But if you're just using it to display upgrade notification, then it's perfectly valid, you know? Um,
Yeah,
it's just that we can't use it to actually
any critical task.
create a sane cluster. You know, we have to be more, we can't rely on it in order to function.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. I'll take another look.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Tracebacks, manager of tracebacks.
Yeah, this is just this. You can take this offline. I was just frustrated because the rook code was hitting a exception, and the wrapper was basically eating the traceback, and so you can't see where this error was happening. You see the traceback for where that gets re-raised later.
Uh,
So it's making it hard to
they
debug on it.
should be written to the log file, to the manager log file.
Yeah, this is cut and paste from the log file, so I couldn't figure it out.
No.
Anyway,
Okay.
um, yep, that's it.
Okay. John, guess that's you.
Francesco, did
Yep.
you
Hey,
want
hey, yeah. We, if you recall the last conversation that we had on Manila, interacting with Ceph and CephFS with Ganesha, if you recall, we adopted the triple O Ansible code, which is supposed to replace Ansible, same steps that are relevant for the OpenStack use case. So we are approaching the PTG on the OpenStack side upstream, and we are trying to figure out the next step for the long-term solution, which is basically having the CephFS daemon being adopted by Ceph ADM as any other regular daemons deployed by Ceph. So we came up with a spec which is supposed to describe our scenarios, the use cases that we're trying to cover, and we have some questions that are that have some implication on the changes that we need to make within the Manila driver to interact with Ceph and Ganesha. And that's the reason of this this topic here. The first thing I saw is that in order to interact with Ganesha, we have to create an export or delete an export. We have some CLI provided by the orchestrator. And this link there, we have this common Ceph NFS export or delete. We can get info from the cluster or describe your export. We can do a lot of things. So the first question that came out was if there is a way to interact with the orchestrator, not only via CLI, but also using libraries, API, and because from Manila we can define the share and then translate it into a Ceph command that is consumed by an API. So this is the first question. if you have plan to export a layer, an orchestrator layer that can be used by other services, third-party services, to interact with external components.
If you're just talking about wanting a REST API as opposed to a CLI, then the answer is sort of not really. Like, but the CLI is not just like a CLI. You can also feed it. You can use the Orch apply and feed it the YAML specification for the NFS service. So you can do it that way. And one of those NFS commands, like NFS export apply, I believe it is, you can feed either a JSON description of the export, or you can feed it an actual Ganesha config block, and it'll import those.
Yeah.
So it's pretty flexible in that regard, but it is still the easiest way to access it is still via CLI. I'm not sure if the dashboard API has a way to do the dashboard API. You can probably do it that way if you're using that endpoint. But
yeah, I saw that part in the dashboard that you are able basically to define your export and push the button. So I was wondering if there is an API that we can use on a different application to interact with this layer.
There is, yeah. So that it's the API that the dashboard uses is the like official REST API for managing the cluster, and so you can use that as well. I don't know.
So yeah, so in theory we can start investigating this this part, see if it's better using this API to interact with the orchestrator or just use the CLI. And okay.
I have a question regarding the CLI. So what permissions are needed for the user that is launching the CLI command? Like if we didn't have the admin hearing, what grants?
Oh,
you need.
Otherwise, you'd need a, I guess the manager write capability, or like, can't remember exactly. You need a write capability on the manager in order
to be able to do that. Because in the past, I think Manila was going to. So, but this would be the best way to interact with the stuff, like the more, let's say, sorry, the recommended approach to interact with the shares versus going into the pool itself, creating the namespace, adding the share for Ganesh.
Don't do that.
No.
Definitely
don't
use
do
CLI. Yeah.
Okay. And okay. I think the reason why I was asking about the grants is that in the past, because we were writing into the pool, we didn't need specific permissions to operate against the cluster. We just needed permissions to write into the pool. So now that's a little bit more. But
it should be possible to craft a capability that only lets you use the NFS commands. That like basically the capability could be a list of the specific Ceph NFS, whatever commands that you end up using. It's a little bit tedious to write those capabilities, but it is certainly possible to do that if you want to narrow it down to like just the set of commands that you specifically need.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and this is how do we do that? How do we learn?
Yeah, let me pull up the documentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll need a minute to go dig it up, but we can find it. I had a question about this piece above here. It's not clear what. Sounds like you need to change other options within the Ganesha config block. Wondering what exactly those changes are that you need to make that aren't.
Yeah, actually, this is how it worked in the past. And now we should rely on this new interface, Ceph NFS interface, to export or delete a share without the need of changing Ganesha.conf and reloading it. Actually, my real question was related to updating specific portion of Ganesha.conf, because I see actually you can do that using the same Ceph NFS interface, but the problem is that this approach has some limitations. You can, for example, you cannot see, if you go within the container, you can just see the default config. And I think what you push within the NFS cluster object is stored in the manager or in an object within the cluster, and it's not reflected to the Ganesha config. This is different. And we were wondering if there is a way to describe how your NFS daemon is in a specific time. Maybe we can ask for interface that generates a description of the current snapshot of Ganesha daemon. I don't know if it's relevant or not.
You're talking about the Ganesha.conf file that's inside the container for a particular daemon?
Yeah, we have two things here. The first one is updating specific portions of this Ganesha conf. We can do that because I see an API where you can specify a portion of this config, and it's stored within the manager, within the cluster. But if you want to apply, if you want to incrementally change this configuration, you need to reset it and apply a newer version to this Ganesha. So there's no way to apply different pieces of files in a different time without resetting the NFS cluster config.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Do you remember how that's done, Sebastian?
There is a user config in the NFS module. That user config can be overwritten. But it's only one user config. So if you're overwriting the user config, then you can actually overwrite existing blocks.
Yeah.
But you cannot overwrite blocks that are written in the Ganesha.conf template. So the NFS module user config is restricted to things that are not yet defined in the Ganesha.conf.z2. So you cannot override things that are listed here, but anything else can be overwritten in the user config of the NFS module. So you cannot override NFS copper and NFS or V4, Redis, Kiwi, and ZW, for example. But everything else can be overwritten.
Okay. And every time I just push a new config portion, I need to reset the entire config. As far as I can see from an experiment I made.
If you are overwriting the user config in the NFS module, then you shouldn't need to reset anything.
Okay. Now, because for instance, if I just apply logs full debug, okay, in my NFS cluster, and then according to the documentation, and then I had a custom export block, I cannot do that because it just said that my cluster is already, my config is already set. So I need to reset the configuration, create a new full block, and then apply it again.
Yes.
If this is the behavior that is expected, I'm okay. I was just thinking about incremental things that can be applied against a Ganesha instance without the need of reset the cluster, the user config in the middle.
I've added the link in the other pad. Here's the command in the CLI. So you can call Ceph NFS cluster config set.
Yeah, where an argument should be provided with the config file, where I can define the block that I need to override, and it's what I did.
Exactly.
The only thing I saw is that if you apply two different config files, if a user config exists, then I guess it's not.
It's written to a common config object, so it's going to be it's overwriting itself.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at the code now. Yeah. So I guess the first thing is how to interact with this component, and we saw that probably the CLI is the best option that we have. Because I'm also looking at the NFS Ganesha used by the dashboard. The difference between the dashboard and an external component is that you cannot just import the codes that reside within the Ceph code base. You need a library to interact with.
Yeah, the CLI is definitely a bit more direct access to the cluster, and that's, I guess, what you want. Otherwise, you will inevitably end up to patch the dashboard in order to make it to extend the dashboard in order to add the features that you really need to have. If you want to have fast progress, and I would say if you want, you could look into avoiding the dashboard at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Quick question on the config thing. I see we have a NFS cluster config set and reset commands.
Mm-hmm.
Are we just missing a get? Is that basically what you're saying? Because we don't have a way to view what the current.
This could be useful. That was my first question when I asked for a description of the current status of Ganesha. Yeah, definitely. A get cluster status could be interesting with all the exports and
Well, I mean, there's an info command that gives you sort of high-level information, and you can list exports. There isn't a command that will fetch that fragment of the Ganesha config.
Yeah. Okay. The alternative is that, because the alternative is run several commands that list all the exports, then the info against for each export you can get the info, and you can collect all the information, Ganesha, FNFS daemons, and then you can build the description of the FNDR get.
Yeah, I think that's probably, I mean, you can do ls, like export ls detailed, I think, and it'll dump all the exports all in one go. But that's separate from the cluster info. There's probably like three commands. It's like cluster info, dump all the exports, and then one to fetch the cluster config, which we would have to add.
Yeah.
But that should be an easy addition, I think, because these cluster config is just written to a Rados object, so we just need to read it, dump it. I think it's empty normally, if I remember correctly. That's normally just a blank, the placeholder.
But it might also be missing it entirely, so.
But should just return an empty string or whatever.
Yep.
Okay, I think it's all. I mean, I'm not sure about the parameters that are required for Manila for the new changes. If there is a requirement or a change within the Ganesha.conf templates, within the Ceph ADM, the orchestrator. But at the moment, I think the first question was mostly how to interact with this new command and if it's the right way to do it. Because the older code was interacting with Ganesha. It was a different. So we're trying to move using the watch URL approach. So the configuration generated by Ceph ADM could be good. I'm not sure if there is any parameter that we want to change, but it's definitely a good starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, hopefully you won't have to change anything. That's the goal.
A comment on why I was asking about the grants is that in our scenario, we supposedly don't have admin rights for the Ceph cluster, because in the there's the storage team dealing with the Ceph cluster, and there is the whatever infrastructure or whatever team dealing with OpenStack. So they don't have the admin keyring, but yet you want Manila to be able to create the share or in Ganesha. So that's why.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I think starting with that capability is the right thing to do. Then that just gives you access to the handful of NFS cluster and NFS export commands that you want.
I have an additional question, actually, because basically for Manila, moving to the Ceph ADM, this NFS managed by Ceph ADM, means that we need an ingress on top of the NFS daemon. Because at the moment, the architecture on the OSP side, that we have the Ganesha daemon and then the virtual IP owned by Peacemaker. So Peacemaker also has a constraint that goes from the virtual IP to the NFS systemd unit provided by Ceph Ansible. But if Ceph ADM deploys the NFS daemons, then Peacemaker could not manage the NFS daemon because they both try to interact with the systemd unit, and it's not the right way to do. So I think at this point, the ingress daemon that provides the VIP virtual IP field is required. And my question is if the status of the ingress is could go in production or issues with this part.
It works today, except that the failover is slow. But that will be fixed, right? That basically depends on the agent work that we're doing. That is merged in master, and it needs to bake oil before we backport it. But
so Francesco, I think we can work in parallel on that. In other words, just know that the failover, in other words, develop with throwing away Pacemaker and realizing it's going to be not as fast at first.
Yeah.
But use the ingress, exercise it, provide feedback.
Yeah.
And there may be some long range challenges, even if we had Kubernetes doing it instead of the orchestrator. I mean, it's a polling loop, of some sort, as I understand it, so we'll have to see how it works for HA and understand it.
I mean,
the
failover
resurrection part, the part where the demons restarted. you know.
The failover already works. It's just a bit too slow for the clients.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Saad Ali in the storage SIG in Kubernetes says Kubernetes provides eventual restart, not HA. So I mean that I'm not taking sides on this, but I mean this is the challenge. This is not Kubernetes, but it's a similar approach to restartability, and it's got to get good enough to move to for production. But I think that's the plan. So.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Are you happy? Or yeah, there are still open questions.
I have a dumb question about
That's it.
the orchestrator interface and exports on the one hand, and this watch URL mechanism on the other. Today we use this dbus command to update exports. Today, ancient history into the present, and it's synchronous. So that we find out whether the export was successful or not at the same time that we issue the dbus command. Manila share container runs dbus. We see right back, I mean, it sends a signal over to the Ganesha container through the host. And using SSH if there are more than one host involved. And immediately there's a return code that says either the export took or there was some error, and we see what the error is back on Manila share if it fails. Is it correct that with the orchestrator export command we have asynchronous interface now, and we need to check on status afterwards using watch URL or some polling mechanism or something or another?
Yeah.
Okay.
Asynchronous. I'm not sure what the right way to check for an error is.
Yeah, so we'll have to figure that out. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I don't have a
yeah, so we can't just substitute the Ceph orchestrator command where we have the dbus command today, and no, I mean we're going to have a little more complication there of some sort, and just getting on what the challenge is there. Not overwhelming probably, but.
And if that like snowballs into something terrible, like it might be that we need to make a NFS cluster reload command that is synchronous, right? That captures all that. But
yeah, I was just thinking, depending on how complicated it is to do and what the threading model is over on the Manila side and so on. And then, okay, thanks for that kind offer. I'm not saying we should do that, but being open-minded about how we do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could call Ceph ort restart NFS, but the NFS name. But that's also asynchronous. Because we can't synchronously restart all the daemons on all hosts because of timeout issues. We would block the manager command handling thread for the duration of the SSH timeout for all the hosts in some, and that's just too long. So we cannot provide a synchronous way to restart all the daemons at once.
Okay, and that reminds me as well, for exports, being able to update change log levels or whatever without actually restarting the daemon would be nice to have. Being able to update exports without restarting the daemon and breaking the data path is essential. And we have that with dbus today. Ramana Raja told me that Varsha was working on that. I'm not sure where I heard that she's back in school or something. I'm not sure where we are on that, but that's an essential condition is that we be able to update exports without breaking the data path, right? So presumably we can't, if we do the equivalent of a SIG-HUP to reload config, we don't want to actually restart the process. Is that everything I'm saying makes sense? Or
I think that was
is this
done
a
using.
surprise in any way?
I think that was done using Radar's notifications, right, Sage?
Yeah, and there's some subtlety there that I don't quite remember. I think it's if you add an export, you just poke the notify object and it'll add the export. But if you modify or remove one, then there's a reload or a restart. But I forget exactly. There's some weirdness there. Yeah.
So if we just naively call the orchestrator command to add an export, we
it'll
do
work.
not
It's just
expect
async.
it. We expect it to work as I'm saying today. We don't
Yeah.
have to mess at a low level with an object.
Yeah, you don't have. Yeah. Everything will work. It's just asynchronous. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So the asynchronous part's the only challenge. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know exactly what the mechanics of the debug method are, but it might be that we want to basically make the orchestrator go go poke via debug synchronously just so that we get a or not. I'm not.
Yeah, I
about
think
that.
Jeff Layton was pushing us to move to the newer off
Yeah.
of debug for various reasons, independent of this. But I'm happy to take a naive approach and just call the command if it does what we need
Sleep.
to do. Yeah.
Any self-respecting software developer would do.
Which in theory should work using the watch URL approach, because it's Ganesha itself that used this approach to reload using a SIG-UP the config. At least I saw that. I'm not sure it's.
Okay, thanks. I actually have to run off to an appointment, but for letting me drop in here. I'm in good hands with all these good OSP side people. Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you. Great information.
Oh, we have the link already. Perfect. Radar's URL watch. Perfect. Okay. Anything else regarding NFS?
I think that's it.
Okay. Anything else we can discuss today? Have a great week, everyone. Thank you for joining.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.